Everybody. My name is Alyssa. My pronouns are she, they, and I will be your host this evening alongside Sartasha. And welcome. We're recording the webinar so we can post it for future viewing. We're going to turn microphones and cameras off for attendees, and they're going to stay off throughout the webinar. I'm going to let you know a little bit about Climate Justice Durham, which is the group I'm part of. It is a multi-generational group of volunteers advocating for effective, equitable climate action in Durham Region. To address the climate crisis, we are advocating for better government policy at all levels, improved community awareness and understanding, and urging action to build community capacity and resilience. And we're so glad that you could join us for the first Learning Circle of 2026. We are super pleased to partner with the Whitby Sustainability Advisory Committee tonight to bring you this presentation. And our topic is food insecurity and solutions in Durham Region. It is timely and was proposed by the advisory committee members. All of us have experienced rapidly rising food prices in the last few years. This inflation is in part a direct result of climate change costs and disruptions to growers in the supply chain. Our goal is to present practical, factual information to educate people and equip the community for action so that hopefully tonight some people will feel inspired and empowered to go and start making change to help build community and protect this small, beautiful corner of the planet. If this is your first time participating in a CJD event, please let us know in the chat how you heard about it. We love to hear how people are finding the learning circles. And now we're going to welcome the Whitby Sustainability Advisory Committee. And to introduce them, we have Zartasha Zainab.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for the introduction. Welcome everyone to this webinar tonight. My name is Natasha, and I am a member of the Whitby Sustainability Advisory Committee here in town of Whitby. The Whitby Sustainability Advisory Committee helps guide the town's sustainability and climate efforts. We advise Council on the 2019 climate emergency declarations, support community education and awareness, and work with staff and residents to identify and advance plans, programs, and policies that strengthen environmental stewardship in our community. We are so grateful to be having this conversation tonight. Now we're going to move on to our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Corporation of the Town of Whitby is situated on the traditional lands of the Seven Billions Treaties First Nations, the Great Anishinaabe Nations of the Mississaugas Group of Island, Elderville, Curve Lake, and the Hawaii, and the Chippewa Nations, the Basoli Chippewas of the Georgina Island, and the Ramas. The town of Whitby strives to honor the Durham treaties through learning, partnership, celebration, as well as reconciliation. We recognize the enduring presence and relationships between Indigenous people and lands and waters on which we live, work, as well as play. We are committed to learning from the past, acknowledging the impact of colonization, and working towards meaningful reconciliation. We express our gratitude to the First Nations, the Inuit, the Métis people, for caring for this land and its resources. We pledge to respectfully share in the responsibility of protecting and caring for the ancestral treaties for generations to come as we move forward towards friendship and partnerships. I'm now going to move on to introduce our two speakers. So the Climate Justice Durham and Whitby Sustainability Advisory Committee would like to welcome Mary Drummond and Francesca Hannan of the Durham Food Policy Council. Mary is one of the founding members of the Durham Food Policy Council in 2010 and its current chair. Prior to that, Mary was a key mover in consulting and developing the Durham Region Food Charter as part of the task force that advanced the charter endorsed by the Regional Council. The charter forms the mandate for the Durham Food Policy Council. Mary also participated in the development of the report that Francesca will now be sharing tonight. Mary also is connected to the Food Communities Network, initiated during the pandemic, and is chair of the Durham Integrated Growers for a Sustainable Community. Our second speaker here is Francesca Hannan. She is also a member of the Durham Food Policy Council since 2019. She is one of the principal researchers and authors of the Durham Food Systems Report and will be discussing these findings in her remarks tonight. Francesca is also experienced in climate justice, organizing with Green Jobs Oshawa and Toronto 350. So we have a lot of knowledge with our two speakers here tonight. So welcome, Mary and Francesca. Yeah, and I will now pass it back to Elsa.
Thank you, Zara Tasha. Some quick ground rules before Francesca and Mary get started. Please be respectful and considerate of others when you're in the chat. We have the chat open tonight, so you can put your questions there and like the questions that others have asked. Trevor, one of the members of CJD, who's helping us field questions from the chat and is going to take note of them and the amount of likes that they have so that we know what people really want to hear answers to, so that we can queue them up for response at the end of the presentation. And he's also going to be our timekeeper. We've also on our team have Sarah, who's going to be helping with the slides. I'm going to launch a poll as Francesca and Mary get started to see what folks already know on this topic as Francesca and Mary take it away.
All right, should I take it away? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us. So I'm going to be going through the presentation for the most part tonight. Mary's going to jump in at the end to talk about some present work that's going on around a food strategy and to help answer questions as well. So Sarah, you can go ahead and go to the first slide. All right, so we should start with definitions. So we were invited here to talk about food security, but DFPC's kind of official stance is that we should not talk about food security without talking about the broader concept of food sovereignty. As you can see in our mission statement, we strive to create an environment that supports community food security through food sovereignty and a sustainable local food system. So what is food sovereignty? This is a concept that was developed initially by a movement of peasant farmers in the global south called Via Campesina that expanded to bring in many other groups. And ultimately, there was an international forum in 2007 where this concept was formalized. And it basically has to do with broadening out the idea of food security to look at the underlying causes of insecurity, including control over land, resources, political processes. So the formal definition is the right of people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. And I also wanted to point out that Durham Region's official plan, I would say, indirectly acknowledges food sovereignty by providing the following definition of food security. So all community residents obtain a safe, culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate diet through a sustainable food system that maximizes community self-reliance and social justice and the ability of the agricultural community to support this system. So it's about acknowledging the link between food security and environment and democracy, I would say. One interesting thing to note about the definition of food security that is in the official plan, it falls under the section on climate change adaptation. It's basically just part of a kind of broad policy statement that the region will strive to do climate change adaptation. But it's just an interesting kind of link to note that at least formally, our regional government has acknowledged that link between food security and climate. And I'll touch on that a little bit later throughout this presentation. So next slide. So we're going to talk about two different levels of food security tonight. The kind of stats that were talked about at the beginning in Alyssa's introduction about rising food prices and the crisis that we're facing, that's really linked to household food insecurity. which is, of course, directly linked to economic issues and to poverty reduction. So that's your basic, the most basic definition of food security is, does everybody get enough food to eat? And in Canada, we're having a real crisis where the answer to that is no, not all citizens have access to a sufficient diet, and that's due to poverty. But because DFPC takes that broader food sovereignty approach, we also talk about food security at the community and the regional level. So that has to do with kind of actually producing and being able to distribute enough food in the region to keep our collective community provided basically with food. And the reason that that is important is because it provides resilience against supply chain shocks and emergency situations. So, as mentioned, the region considers food security a component of climate change adaptation. Obviously, this can have to do with the fact that climate change is producing more severe weather events. So there is a higher risk of situations where we are not able to get as much food into the region from outside. And so if that occurs, how much food at any given time is present in the region, and do we have the capacity to distribute it at the regional level? That is another form of food security. So I put directly linked to climate change adaptation. I also just noted potentially mitigation. I think the data is like a little bit more unclear about the concept of food miles. Obviously, a more regional food system, food is traveling shorter distances, but it is still being transported often with fossil fuel producing means of transport. So I think the literature there is a little bit less clear. But it is just another link to climate change and food security. So next slide. So this is the preamble of the Durham Region Food Charter. I think we mentioned in Mary's introduction, she was involved in developing this document back in kind of 2009, well, leading up to 2009. It's a two-page document in total. It's available on DFPC's website. But the idea of this charter, it was a vision that different actors in Durham Region, different citizens, came together to develop of the idea of food system planning. So food system planning is basically the approach that we need if we want to achieve really robust food sovereignty. It's about looking at food as this overall system, um, which includes things like agriculture, environmental protections, just kind of like public health, people's access to food, whether commercially or non-commercially. It's about kind of getting things out of silos where you have, say, like a public health department that cares about food security, household food security, and an economic development department that cares about like creating jobs in agriculture, and a sustainability department that cares about environmental impacts. Currently in government, all three of those departments have separate mandates, and they're not necessarily always given the time, the resources, the mandate to collaborate with each other and find kind of like root sources of problems and ways to kind of like address multiple issues related to food at once. So the concept of food system planning is a concept that has been developed over the past 20, 30 years to kind of address those issues. And DFPC is a citizen council. So after the development of the food charter, which I should say was also formally endorsed by Durham Regional Council, DFPC was established as a citizen council and basically has been a council that advocates for food system planning to be done in the region. And that could look different ways. It could be, different levels of government taking that on. It could be non-government organizations trying to take on part of that. But DFPC has not necessarily been the body that can do the food system planning ourselves. I think if DFPC was able to grow to have like a really large membership that represents every sector of the food system and some kind of like consistent resources, maybe DFPC could be an actor that does some form of food system planning. But throughout the history of DFPC, this has really been a relatively small citizen council and totally grassroots, like not connected to any government, not connected to like an organization that provides any consistent funding. It's citizen, volunteer based. So we have really just done our best to advocate for actors to come together, advocate for maybe governments to consider taking on food system planning as part of their agenda. And as mentioned, in some way, the regional government has acknowledged that. They did endorse the food charter in 2009, and they did include food as a component of the climate change adaptation policy. I think you guys in Climate Justice Durham probably know that the region has made many climate-related policies that have never been implemented. So if you go to the climate adaptation plan, there is a whole pillar of that that is related to food system planning, but that has not necessarily been acted on in a significant way so far. So next slide. So the Durham Food System Report Card is the most recent kind of big project that DFPC has taken on. And we basically did this to try to create a picture of the regional food system, a sort of Durham region specific explanation of all of the different issues that are related to food sovereignty. And we hope that we can use this as kind of a basis for continuing that advocacy for food system planning. Maybe it provides something concrete that different actors in the food system and maybe our regional government can look at to kind of understand what we are advocating for. And we used a food sovereignty framework to structure this document. So we used the 7 pillars of food sovereignty. These were developed at the international forum that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation and also kind of amended and clarified for a Canadian context by Food Secure Canada through something called the People's Food Policy Project for Canada. So we structured the report card according to those 7 pillars. And if you go to the next slide, we basically separated out these indicators that are kind of these are the things that we would want to assess and keep track of in order to create a picture of are we or are we not realizing food sovereignty in Durham region. So it's quite broad. And at this point, I do want to say I am not an expert in any of these one individual topics. And there are people across Durham region that you could have come and give a whole webinar on any one of these things. And they're all important. I am just a citizen who spent a couple of years kind of reading everything I could find in Durham about our food system and talking to as many people as I could who have expertise or experience in these different areas. So I'm really only going to be able to kind of touch on the broad picture of food sovereignty in Durham during this presentation, but in my slides, I have linked specifically to each of these little chapters, the indicators, so that if you want to learn more, if you want to see like citations and learn about the actors in Durham that you might be able to go to learn more about any of these individual issues, you can consult the report card. It's available on the DFPC website. So to run through the pillars quickly, I won't read out every indicator. But there is food is sacred. I'm going to talk about that in a second. It's basically acknowledging that food is more than a commodity. Food for people is about that like most direct food insecurity issue, like making sure that everybody has access to food. Valuing food providers is about looking at the health of farmers and people working in food service, food retail, like again, looking at the kind of jobs and livelihoods that the food system provides and whether those are adequate. Works with nature has to do with sustainability, environmental sustainability. Localizing the food system is about that kind of material economic ability I was talking about to produce and circulate food at the regional level. Puts control locally is about the actual political democratic processes in place to help people exercise some sort of power over their local food system. And builds knowledge and skills is about kind of continuing to be able to reproduce a healthy food system by having people understand food and continuing to learn to produce food and go into agriculture. So next slide, I just highlighted the specific indicators that I have linked to in these slides. I'm going to touch on the ones that are most directly linked to food security and climate. Unfortunately, there's not time to talk about every single thing, but they're all important. Next slide. So there are two topics that we always like to try to foreground when we go through the pillars of food sovereignty, because we think they have a sort of fundamental importance and that sometimes they can potentially get lost in the conversation if we don't specifically take a moment to focus on them. So the first is that pillar, that first pillar, food is sacred. This was like a very essential principle that was kind of underlying the development of the food sovereignty framework. It's about viewing food as more than a commodity. Like it's about acknowledging the spiritual and cultural importance of food, the importance of food as a link between human beings and the environment. And so our ideal food system would provide not only that like direct food security of everybody's able to have enough to eat, but would also create opportunities for people to have a really meaningful relationship with food. So you're, yes, able to meet your nutritional needs, and your relationship with food is also something that is enriching your life as a human. And unfortunately, because food security is so tied in with the current structure of our economy, sometimes when we talk about solutions, we can get kind of, I think, we have such urgent issues to address within the current system that sometimes we are just talking about how to make food as a commodity more available. And so we don't want to lose the idea that as we develop a better food system, as we kind of build a food sovereignty movement, can we think of ways to also create those cultural community connections to food? And then the next slide. Um, Next slide is just the other thing that we like to highlight is Indigenous food sovereignty. As mentioned, the development of food sovereignty was really driven by people who had their access to land and resources that they needed to control their own food system cut off. And in the Canadian context, I would say like everybody has their ability to control their food system limited, but there's obviously a very specific history of Indigenous communities specifically having, legal actions taken by the government that really directly severed their connection with their traditional food systems. So in Durham Region, we've seen this with the Williams Treaty Nations that were acknowledged at the beginning of this webinar. That treaty did, it was found, infringe upon traditional fishing rights of those nations, and that was the subject of a settlement with the federal and provincial governments in 2018. You can look up the details of that. But basically, because Williams Treaty Nations had to fight that case, they did create quite a body of evidence documenting their traditional foodways. And I also was able to do a little research and found a talk that the Band Council president of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation gave a few years ago, where she talked a little about that case, and she also mentioned that moving forward from that, the community was looking to actually buy back land that they needed to access their traditional fishing waters. So there is really interesting food sovereignty work going on in the Indigenous governments and communities in this region. DFPC has not necessarily been able to make, like when we were doing the report card research, we did reach out to the Mississauga Island First Nation government. And they were the one kind of local government that we did not get to make direct contact with. Indigenous governments are really flooded with requests for consultation all the time, so I can understand why they would not have time to give an interview for this kind of really small, not directly related to any like actual government action project. But it's something that we would really like to. We did talk to a lot of people in the urban Indigenous population, but we would like, as an organization, to have more meaningful connections with Indigenous people in the region because we do think that, if we think about what a really robust food sovereignty movement would look like, if we were able to better understand like the traditional foodways in this region and how to the work that's being done to revitalize them, uh, that makes the whole food system stronger, I think. It obviously connects in with regional ecosystems. Like if we want to have traditional fishing rights protected, we are then talking about the health of the watershed, and that in turn is going to affect all the local farms and be affected by all the local farms. So it's just a very important part of the overall food sovereignty picture that we would hope to learn more about and being able to engage with more in the future. Next slide. Okay, so household food insecurity, um, as mentioned, is a huge crisis in Canada. And it's unfortunate that we can only really talk about it in one slide, but there is a wealth of information available. The Durham Health Department does keep track of food insecurity in Durham, and they keep up-to-date information on their website. So the main thing I can say about household food insecurity is that it is caused by income insecurity. And there's a huge body of research behind this. You can again look to the report card for references. But because income insecurity is the cause of this, it is really something that will not be solved until very serious economic and social welfare reforms are done. And a lot of that needs to happen at the provincial and federal policy level. So here in Durham Region, we can't do as much to address the root cause. There is a regional poverty reduction strategy, and there are like numerous different organizations and municipal governments in the region that are responding to the crisis to some extent. The region, for example, has committed 750,000 in funding to food security and poverty initiatives. But this is really a response. It is not an underlying solution. One thing I want to mention on this slide as well is school food programs. DFPC, we are an endorser of a national organization called the Coalition for Healthy School Food that has been campaigning for many years for a national school food policy. They actually did achieve that. The Liberal government a couple of years ago put out a national school food policy. Basically, it amounts to there is going to be more funding provided for the school food programs that currently exist that are administrated at kind of the provincial level. And then there's kind of like between regional and provincial level bodies that distribute funding for things like your breakfast programs, snack programs. And we had a very interesting meeting with a representative from the Durham Child Nutrition Project, which is the organization that administers that in this region. Um, it's very much an ongoing process of trying to get programs into all the schools that need them. Um, Very complicated, and again, something that you can look more into. Um, it is at this stage still kind of just it's about funding for those snack and breakfast programs where basically the schools are purchasing some food to provide to students. It's not like a school meal. It's not a school lunch in the way that a lot of other like G8 nations do provide. Canada's kind of the only one that does not have that formal of a school meal program.
Of course, Francesca will have a lot more to say on some of this stuff because she's done the digging. We sent her forth. We said, okay, no, that's not enough. And we sent her out again. And she did really great things about digging up stuff. So you'll see that it's related to indicator 2B, community food access, and indicator 5C, local food availability, access, and so when she's talking about looking at the geographic location of different types of food access points, so close to where people live and accessible by transit or walking. So when you're thinking of that, think of North Durham and what it might look like if you're living in rural North Durham and you don't have food. You would need to access the food bank or a food program, right? I'm looking at questions in the thing. So you see, I needed Francesca after all. So in North Durham, they do have issues with that because often there's not transit that people can drive around to get to food banks or food access points, right? So either the food has to go to them. It could also be in one of the priority neighborhoods listed in Durham. There's 5 of them. There's quite a few in Oshawa. There's one in Ajax. There's one in Whitby, believe it or not. And those areas may not have grocery stores close to where these people can actually get to them. They may not have cars. They may not have funds to get on transit. So a lot of that's focused in that area. As I said, North Durham. So she talks about solutions, short-term interventions such as the mobile food market. Nourish and Develop has put that into place. So that mobile food market will go to different locations and people will come to it. It will be closer to where they are. And it is stocked they have connections with local farmers that donate or they can buy produce or at a lower cost. And so it'll be all fresh produce that they will get. So I don't know if you know much about fresh produce, but if it's freshly picked, it will last in your refrigerator a longer than a product that is, say, that you pick up on a grocery store shelf that's traveled a couple thousand miles to get to you. So having grown and donated few thousand pounds with the project that I was associated with, anyone that we donated to, we could be pretty sure that food was going to last for like a week in their fridge and still be pretty healthy and give some good nutrition. So the mobile food market has actually been a model for other mobile food markets in Durham. So the community care down here in South Durham has picked that up, and they have mobile food markets that are connected. One has just been connected with a food community garden project in a priority area, and we're hoping to connect not with my other organization. I think I'm getting texted by my buddy, but I don't know where I put my phone. So these are going to be handy to have in those areas where people cannot afford to buy fresh produce. And definitely agree with the last point on her slide, longer term, increasing number of access points, improving the transit system. Definitely a helpful thing for these people, especially those people living in poverty. You just don't have funding for this, for these kind of things, and they walk a lot distances. They avoid the transit. So technology, isn't it wonderful? So localizing the food system is it's a big thing in the food charter, which is our basis, our mandate. Through that whole process of developing the food charter with all the various facets and sectors of the food system that came together to have input into that, and localizing our food system was one of the big things. So again, if you look in indicator 3A, farm business diversity, and indicator 5A, localized production, processing, distribution. So she has here structures of the existing system based on an economies scale, large sellers and buyers, large volumes transported over long distance. So localizing reduces all that long travel if we can have more of that done within the region. And if you're looking through the actual report card, you will see that we do not grow or raise as the food we need, the food that we consume. We're not up to that level. So we also need to really connect the small sellers and buyers. But some of that actually transpired really well during COVID when small farmers couldn't get to the farm markets and things like that. They weren't open. They started doing online programming. And so you can go online and purchase. So some really good things came out of that. And I'm not sure where she was going quite with this, but solutions, 2 gaps to fill. So the infrastructure definitely within the middle. So processing in Durham region is very limited. And the financial cover food providers' costs. So it refers to our providers being able to get the income that they need to be able to operate their business and continue to provide food for us in Durham. And we also looked at DFPC about institutional procurement. There was a huge study that was actually done in Durham and looked at procurement in institutions and looked at ways that could be done. Some institutions are effectualizing that now, but that is something that really needs more work. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And land use planning for regional security. Again, indicator 4A, protection of farmland. That's certainly a huge thing in the last regional official plan. And indicator 5B, development accessibility of urban ag. That is, sorry, I'm getting interrupted. So in rural areas, protect farmland from urbanization. Currently, right now, we don't know how much of the farmland is actually owned by possibly developers. And the last session, it took a huge swath of farmland, despite regional staff recommendations. It took a huge swath of actual farmland out of our regional area. Oh dear, I don't think Francesca can get in. All right, she can't get back in, so you're gonna have to deal with me. I'm terribly sorry. She had a better idea of what was on these slides, but if you can ask me any questions after, I'm sure I have that in my head. I've been doing this for 25 years. So urban areas, the big thing about urban ag in municipalities around the region is simply some of the zoning needs to be changed to allow commercial growing within the urban space. Community gardens are doing not too badly. They are basically, you'll see I was with an organization, I chair an organization that actually promotes and supports and mentors garden project startup, but we also promote other types of urban agriculture. So there's an example of the zoning is we were approached by a group of a couple of them that do vertical farming, and their projects, their farms, their growing had expanded to the point where they needed to actually get inside a building. And when they went to look at warehouses, which were ideal in their mindset, they couldn't do it because there was no zoning. The zoning wasn't appropriate for warehouses. The zoning currently said that you could pack food in a warehouse, but you could not grow food in a warehouse. Therefore, they could not use them. So Ajax then went forward to write policy accordingly because we connected those growers to them, and they actually had an urban ag, a broader urban ag policy in place. So they adapted their zoning to be able to accommodate that. Pickering did not, to the best of my knowledge, although they now have an urban ag policy in place, so that may be being stretched out in the future, but that gives you kind of a example of zoning. And urban agriculture doesn't just fit in any particular place you think you want to put it. We quite often in my other organization have people approach us to we could put in a garden here or there, but municipal staff will tell you that just the ways some of the land lies or flooding issues, these are not good places for community gardens with no access to water. Couldn't be done in certain locations. So let's see where we are in the next slide. You can see by having all those nice little circles on there, we're telling you that you should really read the document. And I definitely would recommend that. I went over it again before tonight, and there's a huge amount of stuff in there that I think is really helpful to everyone. So what we don't have really is, and it came up more than one time through the research process and the process of developing the report card, that we really don't have comprehensive mapping of these kind of assets, food system assets throughout the region. And that would be really helpful for planning and putting our food system together so that we can actually see what's happening. There's little bits in different departments, different sectors. Probably the agricultural sector has most of the information. They have the most data. I mean, you can see by the report card. Hi, Francesca. Do you want to talk about mapping now?
Hi, I'm back. Yeah, I'm so sorry, everyone. And I also don't promise that won't happen again, but I'll do my best. Yeah, well, from what Mary was saying, it sounds like she covered it, or a lot of it. But basically, kind of asset mapping is a important step to take to start bringing the different sectors of the food system together, I think, to start collaborating and looking at the way different issues intersect. Like, are smaller local farms located close to food processing facilities, and are either of those located close to like food charities or gardens or schools? looking at the kind of lack of connection, I think, between different assets in the regional food system and thinking about how to improve those in the future. And yeah, currently it's actually pretty fragmented. And the like even the agricultural assets that Mary was talking about, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to actually update what is available to the public there. I guess I'll move on. It's a complicated issue, but we have to, I guess, get through the rest of the presentation.
Oh, great. I guess I'm back.
Sorry, was I kicked out again at any point?
No.
Kind of skipped through some slides.
We went through, I kept going. So we're down at the bottom here, the next slide on now.
Oh, okay. So you went through like the localizes and
I did the best stuff. I did the best.
Okay, sorry. I have the order of the slides messed up in mind. Okay, that's great. So I guess to sum up, basically food system planning is a really big resource intensive endeavor. It's something that really only happens when a decision is made by enough people with enough access to power and resources to do it. That could be government. I think it works best when it's government because there's a direct connection to policy there as well, but it can also be attempted by like NGOs, just institutions that have enough resources. But to kind of list off what you need consistent coordination between all the different actors in the food system, people who actually have the time and energy to meet consistently, the resources, policy levers, as I think policy was mentioned throughout this presentation, land use, things like that. And with all those things, ideally, you create a strategy that has kind of clear action items in it, so that there's a path towards there is a plan. It is food system planning, a path towards building that kind of robust, localized system. So I think when we're talking about solutions, basically the big picture is that solutions are political. They have to do with acting as a citizen, not just acting as a consumer or a volunteer. Like those things matter. They're part of your agency in the food system. But for real system change, it's a political process. So that's what DFPC tries to advocate for is can we get a critical mass of support for this type of food system planning in the region in order to encourage our politicians to actually be responsive to that, work with citizens, and create a kind of clear mandate with budget for food system planning. So next slide. How can you help? So I tried to actually focus on kind of civic engagement here. So you can read and endorse the Durham Region Food Charter. So we have a option on our website right now. I think it's right on the homepage that you as an organization or an individual can just formally show like that you endorse the objectives of the food charter. You can talk to your elected representatives about food system issues. And if you're interested in DFPC, like we are always open for people to join, or if you want to partner with DFPC through your organization, we're totally open, reach out. And is there another slide? Yeah. And then the last thing I said was to just think about all of the ways that you interact with different actors in the food system. I kind of listed off some examples here. And again, like try to create that civic life, ask people about the issues that they have in their own sector, and recommend to them participating in whatever food system strategy work is currently happening in the region. which I will give Mary the opportunity to talk about what has been in development since the publication of the report card.
All right, so I'll just finish off by sharing that we did not want to let the report cards sit on a shelf and not be useful at some level. So we have we have initiated a few things to see if there was interest. We presented at the Agriculture Advisory Committee and the Environmental Advisory at the region, and both of them were very much behind a food system, a local food system strategy development. We have been partnered with Feed the Need in Durham, and we have been looking at ways to actually bring that to fruition, that we, as a community document or as community work. So we are working on with Tamarack Institute, a consulting firm right now. We have developed a committee that's sort of overseeing the process, and will gradually be bringing more and more people in. So its title is a lovely long one, Strengthening Local Food Systems Through a Collective Impact Approach. So the important part of food security is to have everybody on board, organizations on board, growers on board, etc. And so this is where this process is focused. And at this stage, so with our committee has all been sent out to identify within our circle people within the food system that we should be talking to have an interview to get some insight and give us some insight as to how we should be moving forward to some degree, what would be the important places. And all along this whole process, we will be gathering more and more people until we get to the fall. We're hoping to have a very large event where we bring people together from different sectors of the food system. And so that includes the environmental component as well. So on our committee, we have Landover Landings is currently part of that. We have a commercial urban agricultural farmer. We have DFPC, of course. We have Workforce Authority. We have Feed the Need, of course, Durham College, the Barrett Center on board, and then we'll be looking to expand that. So I think I wanted to leave you with the fact that there is a process going forward. There's a lot of work that's been done over time, and it may not come out under the name of a food strategy. The focus is really to have everybody working toward that. There may not be, sometimes a lot of these projects get stymied because of funding issues. The goal is to have everybody putting in to taking on a piece of this, right? So it's been slow. It was slow to start off, and now it's starting to move. So I feel confident in saying that this is a great step forward, and I hope that you will consider being part of that along the way. And I know there's lots of questions, but I'll leave it there.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Francesca. I'm going to turn it to Trevor for some of the questions from the chat. We'll try to keep it maybe just to a few, just because we are running a bit over time. But Trevor, I know that people have lots to say in the chat, so take it away.
Yes, so glad that you were able to rejoin us, Francesca. It's no problem at all. Mary did a fantastic job picking right up where you left off.
You're gracious.
We're going to just do maybe 3 questions and then we'll wrap. And if folks really do have more questions, I guess we'll encourage them to reach out to the Durham Food Policy Council. I'm assuming they can contact folks if they look on the website. So we'll start with a question about asking how to make the Durham Region Food Charter law so that it is incorporated into decisions regarding land use planning.
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the process it's a community document that was developed by the community, and when we came to what we were going to do, we thought the very same way. We should put that into something so the municipalities or the region or government will work on this. But the population, the people that were with us, they did not want it to be owned by the municipalities or the regional government, so that they would take it over and they would change it or update it, and it would be misrepresentative of the people that were involved in the food system. So it has been used in various strategies, agricultural strategies. It's been mentioned related to in the regional official plan. So those kind of documents. So it does have that feel. And the other question that people ask is, we should update that. And I know what it took to get that agreed document in the community. And I know that sounds a bit of a cop-out, but we actually started with the visioning day in 2006, and we didn't get it endorsed. So by endorsing it, we still kept the document to have ownership with it and to leverage it. If we had them adopt it, we would have lost any input into that. And over and over again through this whole process, whoever came to the symposiums and the follow-up meetings and all the reports always said the same thing. No, they didn't want government to have ownership of the document. But having said that, if anybody has some idea that maybe we haven't thought of, it really should be a document that goes out to people and people use it, whether you're an organization or a municipality, right? So everybody has access to use it, to reference it. It's generally broad. It's broader, and it has more in it than any other food charter that has been developed. So it allows some flexibility, because one of the contentious issues was, of course, we all came to the table with our own ideas of what was best, and we had to come to something that we agreed on. So this is what it is. And I don't know if that answers your question fully, but gives you a bit of the history of why it's where it's at.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you for the question. The next question is, do you have a list of where donations and volunteering can be done in Durham Region to help with household food insecurity?
I would say consult, sorry, Mary, consult Feed the Need in Durham. Yeah. They're the umbrella organization that distributes food to all the different, or not all, but many of the different food programs in Durham. So they have a list of who's under their umbrella. You can look at in the report card as well. We try to mention, like, we're not really able to document all the more informal programs that happen, but if you look around in your community, there could be smaller things like churches, mutual aid organizations that might be missed by the more formal system, but look around for that as well. But Feed the Need is a good resource.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll do one final question, which got a few thumbs up. How can the system we have that is dominated by a few very big companies be a partner in supporting local food system resilience beyond performative donating?
That's a really excellent question. It would be great if we had representatives of those bigger companies at the table. I wouldn't say we were really able to get in contact with them. There are also, when we're talking about the regional level, there are also more mid-sized companies as well. who might be easier to kind of get integrated into a regional system. Like there are a few, like the few kind of food processing and food distribution companies that we have in Durham are not like the massive multinational corporations. These are companies that have kind of like mid-sized facilities in Durham region. So again, like we weren't really able to contact we tried, but we weren't really able to hear from those people either. I think it would take having a more robust like citizen movement that is like getting some action from government already to bring those private sector actors to the table and make them want to participate. Honestly, like, yeah, the performative aspect is kind of always going to be what they are defaulting to. So I think it is about having that like really robust, like this is an economic development agenda. So having really a clear kind of vision of what the regional food system looks like and what role those private companies could play in it, giving them that option to participate. Maybe there has to be some kind of incentivization, subsidization. But when you're going down that route, you might also ask if that's the case, that public funds are going into that, would it make more sense to just have a public regional food hub versus paying a private company to help distribute local food around the region better? But that is like an open question that needs to be kind of figured out through a policy making process that ideally citizens are engaged in so that they are holding government accountable in the way the government interacts with the private sector.
And just to add to that, I would say that I'm hoping that some of that stuff comes out through this, strengthening the local food system project that we're on with this group. Because we have recognized within the committee that we have to have all the players, input of all the players, and that we will be bringing on connections to, the municipal government, and those people have to be involved. But if we wait for that to happen, I can tell you, having been here for 25 years, it's a slow process. So what you see in the report card things, I can tell you that there's been movement, but I remember when I first started and got involved in all of this innocuously, and there was so much happening in regions around us, and I used to go to the conferences and I would say Durham is like a bit of a black hole on this issue because it hasn't even been thought of. So the thing with happening with COVID really brought that food security as a big issue. Like there were major issues around that happened around there, lack of seed for growers, all kinds of things. But it sort of brought home the whole food security issue. And certainly this threats now with tariffs, et cetera, from the South, who knows where that's going. You can see the trends happening that citizens are going to have to be more and more involved. Food security is not something we should be thinking about when there's a crisis that comes. It should be a foundation that we build on. We should always be working on that. We should have had that structure in place before a crisis happened. But municipalities deal with issues that are presented with them directly. So I think this is why I feel, even though we've been delayed a couple of times on this project, I feel it's really necessary for citizens and individual groups to bring this to the fore and actually connect. And there are some groups there that can connect with municipalities fairly easily. So I have hope that we're going somewhere, but we have moved. It's just terribly slow.
I'll just say in response to a comment I see in the chat, what about creating a food charter pledge that supporters could take? So what I did reference earlier, right now on our website, durhamfoodpolicycouncil.com, you can endorse the Durham Region Food Charter as an individual or an organization. That campaign has not really taken off so far, but if everyone here goes and endorses and then shares with people they know to endorse, that helps us start having a visible show of support for the food charter. So that would be very appreciated.
And if you know of anybody we should be talking about for strengthening the local food system, please send us a note at Durham Food Policy Council, info@durhamfoodpolicycouncil.com.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. We really appreciate all of the knowledge and insight. And thank you to everyone in the chat for putting such great questions in there. I'm so sorry that we have to cut it short, but we are running a little over time. So we are going to turn it over to Julia from our team to take a group photo. So Alyssa is going to allow folks to come on.
Thank you, everyone. Good job.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mary and Francesca, for this amazing presentation. We also really grateful to everyone who came out to view the presentation and who submitted excellent, awesome questions. We're grateful for the Sustainability Advisory Committee of Whitby for suggesting the topic and for the Whitby staff for helping with us with this event. If you're going to want to rewatch this presentation or recommend it to a friend, we're going to post it soon onto our YouTube channel. And then that will be available on the Climate Justice Durham website. Some upcoming events. You can watch the Climate Justice Durham socials and website for information about our next learning circle and Earth Day events in April. If you are interested, we have a couple of teasers of potential future topics that are going to be coming up in terms of our learning circles. They include emergency preparedness in the face of climate impacts and climate disasters, the social and environmental impacts of generative AI, and public health risk of extreme heat, just to name a few. You can also keep an eye out if you are a teacher and you're thinking about Earth Day or Earth Month coming up, and you are interested in hearing about programming or possibly guest speakers, you can send CJD an email. And some other events. The Whitby Sustainability Advisory Committee has some events coming up. The community, in partnership with Durham Region, is going to be hosting a workshop on the Durham Greener Homes program on March 3rd from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Whitby Central Library. Secondly, there's going to be a repair cafe and waste diversion event on March 21st from 10 to 2 p.m. at the Whitby Central Library as well. That will open the registration on February 21st, and residents are going to be able to bring items that are broken, that they'd like to get fixed. That includes clothing, jewelry, small appliances, stuff like that. The waste diversion, it's drop-off only. They're collecting things that are typically hard to recycle or reuse, things like pencils, dried out markers and pens, printer ink cartridges, and things like that. You can find more information on those things and register for them on the Town of Whitby community calendar. And so one more time, great, thank you. So many thanks to everyone who attended this Learning Circle webinar.